It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Locked On Lakers podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin. I'm joined by Pete Zayas. Pete, we are on the verge of the first Lakers second-round series since 2012.
Yeah, man. Feels good.
Holy crap.
Feels really good. I forgot how much fun playoff basketball is. And it's so different, right? Just zeroing in on one team. So much fun.
Yeah, it actually feels like a bit like we're kind of participants.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Yeah,
like,
man. This is, yeah.
Like in the regular season, you kind of like go through the motions and, all right, who do the Lakers play tonight? All right, it's another Tuesday. They're in Milwaukee, you know. But for playoff basketball, even if it isn't just you and me, I'm talking about like fans feel like participants in this. You feel like I got to watch the other series because the Lakers might be matched up against that other team there. And it makes for, yeah, you're right. It's I'm happy to have playoff basketball back and feel like a participant. Speaking of participants, I cheated a little bit today. It's been a long time since Pete and I took questions together. Usually the mailbags are on Monday episodes, which I record on Sundays, which usually means Pete isn't on that show. But seeing as it's been a while and we still have another day until the Lakers really kick things off here, I went to Twitter and asked you guys for questions, and holy crap. Pete, is this what your mentions are like always like?
It's an interesting experience, yeah.
Let's go ahead and dive on in, though. First question comes from Dan Bailey.
Dan, good guy.
Yeah, he is. Are there certain teams that play in such a style where it's important to try to adapt to what they do, or is it always about sticking to your principles and making them play your game? As a coach, how would you balance? That's the old John Wooden thing, right?
Yeah, that's such a great question, right? Like, are you locked in this jail cell with me, or am I locked in this jail cell with you, right? Like, are you forced to match up with you?
Man, I know we've been potting for a long time, but you call this a jail cell?
Hey, man. You know, sometimes be looking at the clock. No, man. So I think your first punch is always to get them to match up with you, to get them to adjust to you. I think having the versatility to mask weaknesses that you might have, or to be able to play their style when you need to, is really important. And that's a key component of this series on a zoomed out basis. I think the Lakers can put lineups on the floor to match up with Houston, to play the same style that they want to play. Yeah. They can also put lineups that are very different than Houston's, that Houston can force us out of what we do, but they can't. Like, we can adjust to them.
They can't adjust to us.
They can't adjust to us. They are what they are, and they can't suddenly become bigger, faster, and stronger. And that, just like that physical dominance, that athleticism is such an integral part of this team. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, the athletes on this team, those are like number one overall draft picks, all of whom came into the league as, holy crap, you get a load of that guy type guys, right? Yeah. And like some guys, like Zion's one of those guys, right? And and so having three of them in your front court. Now, does that necessarily mean that this is a Dwight series? I don't know. There's some questions about, Dwight's ability to defend the perimeter, but I am always toward, like, I want us to be very assertive in how we attack Houston. I want us to really force our style of play on them and force them to adjust to it, make them run with us, make them jump with us, make them bang with us, right? All of the areas in which we have a physical advantage. Before I'm adjusting to Houston and their style of play, I'm making them do all of those things, try to have them play our style of play, because they can't do it. So the more that we are able to assert our style of play on the series, the better shape will be.
Yeah, I'm going to go in a more kind of generalized direction. I think what you said is absolutely on point for this series, right? The Rockets don't have that counterpunch that the Lakers do. The Rockets basically have their 98 mile an hour cutter, and you either hit it or you don't. And the Lakers, though, they have the cutter, but they also have like the 102 mile an hour fastball, that is just dominating. So in that respect, yeah, if the Lakers can continue to play big, this series is a short one. And then the other thing that as you were talking really quick before I make the point to actually answer the question, I was watching OKC play against Houston, and I found myself really frustrated with Steven Adams because that's the kind of series that like he has to win for OKC basically, and there were some things that he did do that, helped the team, but I thought like offensively he was a major hindrance. And I think his struggles on offense was just that like he's huge, but he's not very mobile.
Right.
He's a really hulking, kind of cavemanish player.
And he's not like a vertical threat, right? Like if you saw the replay of the last play of the game, like it just like dive to the front of the rim. Like you've got 1.1 seconds left. That's one of your best chances, right? Is like, oh, get the I'm way bigger than you bucket, right? And instead they pass it to him on the 3-point line. I was just facepalm watching that. But he doesn't have right.
Like he cut to the basketball, whereas like if he just seals and puts his hand out there, that's a bucket.
Absolutely.
Both
times, or a foul, right?
The first one.
Oh, the Dort one. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But so I was thinking that too, and to me the difference between Adams and the Lakers bigs is that they are mobile. Like Dwight can,
and vertical.
Squeeze through the cracks and then get vertical. JaVale can kind of squeeze through the cracks and then get vertical. Adams can't squeeze through the cracks and then also cannot get vertical.
Right. I love that phrase, squeeze through the cracks, because that's such an apt description of how our bigs need to attack Houston's defense, right? They are the whole point of what they're trying to do is to not let the other team get to the rim, because they're at a real disadvantage there because of their personnel. So their rim protection is not letting you get to the rim. And if you do, hopefully Robert Covington comes to block the shot, but they just don't have that. And so the Lakers, in order to kind of puncture that outer force field that they're trying to put on an offense, is you've got to find those little cracks, those little places where they make a mistake, where they don't beat you to the spot, because that's how they do it, right? Is by being quicker than you, by beating you to the spot. So all of a sudden you can't get all the way to the rim without, they're going to try to draw a ton of charges on us, offensive fouls. When Dwight does his thing on the offensive boards, they're going to be flying all over the place, right? Acting, because they can't hang with him, right? They can't hang with actually doing it. And that whole mentality that pervaded the last 2 minutes of everybody just trying to sell contact, boy, we are going to see a ton of that in this series. And so getting through those cracks that you're talking about is a perfect description of how our bigs need to attack.
And then to actually answer the question, like for me as a coach, my thing was always like, I'll adjust, but only so long as it doesn't stray too far from my identity. It's basically, if I have a good team,
that's a great point.
If I have a good team, then I want to remain the good team. I want to stick by the guns that got me there in the first place. But I also can't be so, dogmatic in in what I believe got my team to that spot. If there's a way for me to adjust my approach here, and my really good team can be, a different good team that is better suited to beat the team in front of me, then that's the goal.
There's a version of this Lakers team that's a too big lineup, and there's a version with Anthony Davis at the 5, right? And that does, it's close enough to our identity to where if we extend more minutes for AD at the 5, that's a perfectly, like, that's within who we are, right? So that's a good way of putting it.
All right, let's go one more question here. Before we throw to the break, Daman asks, how do you expect the Lakers to keep their too big lineup out there, and who is the one role player on the Rockets you fear the most? So we're kind of we're on the same kind of path here as we were just talking about a second ago. I was thinking about this too, but I'm interested in where you're at.
So Cran just had a great video on this. I actually disagreed with his conclusion, but it was phenomenal on. He actually is advocating for the too big lineup approach. And The reason for that is the way that Houston, you have to look at Houston's setup, and he gets into this great video. He gets into this on, Houston's going 5 out, so they've got all 5 of their guys behind the 3-point line.
Mhm.
And if we're going small, for example, with Anthony Davis, they're going to put whoever AD is guarding in the strong side corner. Whatever side of the court Harden's on, AD is going to be on that side in the corner. And so it gives AD the choice of either staying home, and now we don't have that much rim protection behind him, or he helps and it's the easiest pass to make, and it's the highest percentage 3, a strong side corner 3. That's a really dangerous shot. Now, a couple of things. AD has, which is why he's the best defensive player in the game, in my opinion, AD has the ability to be 2 places, if not 2 places, 1.5 places at once, right? He can help and still end up with a quality closeout in a way that really nobody else in the league can do. So that's one, adjustment to that. If we've got the 2 bigs out on the floor, Grant just accurately pointed this out as well, is that we want one of those bigs on the weak side, right? So having 2 on the floor means that your weak side help is that's a much better place for a rim protector to be. And that really dissuades Harden from driving to the basket. Now, my thought with that is I still want to chase, and this is a philosophical disagreement. He may very well be right, but my inclination is in the spirit of doing what you do well, right? So he properly pointed out all of the, Harden's been more effective at driving to the basket, and it leads to their drive and kick game. They generate more points on that. He hasn't shot the ball particularly well. Now, this isn't like you have to do either or. We can mix this up, right?
I think the big thing is that you have to mix it up.
Absolutely. But I think a big part of that should be limiting Harden's 3, because what we're great at is, we saw this in the Portland series, is putting pressure at the point of attack, being very aggressive on the perimeter, and funneling into our bigs. Then on that drive and kick, we get into rotation. And we're great at rotating and closing out because we're fast. We've got a lot of guys who really take pride in it, and we're big. And so what I think happens, I think the difference is, if we're really locked in, I would rather say we funnel Harden into the paint. JaVale rotates over, contests the shot, contests, around the rim. So Harden's going to kick it out to somebody. We're going to rotate to that first guy. We're going to be able to do that. We're probably going to rotate to that second guy as well. The third guy, we can even chase off of the line. And that is the outcome that I want to pursue in this series, more than James Harden step back 3s, because you can get burned with that. I want Ben McLemore, Jeff Green, Danuel House. I want all those dudes to be chased off of the 3-point line and having to make drive and kick decisions against all of our length. And I think we can do that in doing what we do well. And it's why, while the numbers show that has been successful to just let Harden shoot his shots, I think that they weren't playing us when they yielded those numbers, right? And in our games against them, it's not the playoff version of our defensive rotations. It's and all that. There's also issues on the offensive end as well. I've been rambling for a moment, so I'll leave that be. But just defensively, I want us to do what we do well first, and then adjust the blend between letting Harden take step backs and dissuading him from driving. Adjust that, but I want to see us in rotation, pressuring the ball, being who we are defensively first, and then adjust from there.
Let's take a quick second, and I'm going to give my thoughts on the question as well. Talking about erectile dysfunction isn't easy. Usually we brush it off or blame ourselves or say things like, I lost my mojo, or avoid it altogether with excuses like, I had a long day at work, or sorry honey, I'm just not feeling it. But with Roman, it's easy to talk about it. With a real healthcare professional who can prescribe real medication, it's simple, safe, and totally discreet. With Roman, you can get a free online evaluation and ongoing care for ED, all from the comfort and privacy of your home. A healthcare professional will work with you to find the best treatment plan. If medication is appropriate, Roman will ship it to you with free 2-day shipping. The whole process is straightforward, simple, and again, discreet. Getting started is simple. Just go to getroman.com/LockedOnNBA and complete an online visit. Erectile dysfunction used to be tough to tackle, but now there's Roman. Complete an online visit today and connect with a healthcare professional and take care of it. Go to getroman.com/lockedonnba today. If approved, you'll get $15 off your first order of ED treatment. That's getroman.com/lockedonnba. getroman.com/lockedonnba.
NFL teams making bold final moves before the start of the season. From our local experts to your ears, these are the biggest stories on the Locked On Podcast Network. The Tennessee Titans have announced a one-year deal with linebacker Jadeveon Clowney, reportedly worth $15 million. Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans tells you if it's going to be enough to get Tennessee back to the AFC title game. In other moves around the league, the Miami Dolphins named Ryan Fitzpatrick starting quarterback, which means Tua will be back up for the time being. And the Detroit Lions have agreed to a one-year deal with running back Adrian Peterson. Peterson was released by the Washington football team last Friday. For more NFL news and analysis, subscribe to the new Peacock and Williamson NFL show and listen to a brand new lineup on Locked On NFL. They'll have division previews every day this week. Local experts on the biggest stories. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
One thing that I was really impressed with Dort as in his effort against Harden was the way that he was challenging the shot. Like, this is one of the things that I've always found really interesting as a shooter. Like, I wasn't a very good defensive player, but I was a pretty good shooter. So it's always kind of interesting to see the approaches that good defenders take to bother people in shooting. The example that always kind of comes to mind was Battier sticking his hand in Kobe's face.
Because he knew he couldn't get up that high, right? Like,
yeah.
So work with what you got.
Right. And actually, this was something that I thought Dort did really well, was he was doing a really good job of jumping past Harden's shooting shoulder. So he's doing a really good job at launching himself, not at Harden, because if you launch yourself at Harden, he's going to fall over and he's shooting three free throws. But launching yourself past Harden's shooting shoulder and waving really hard at the ball, just to get Harden thinking that you're there. And I think while, Caruso and KCP and even Danny Green aren't the kinds of athletes that Dort is, he's an extraordinary athlete, especially, physically speaking, with his physicality. I do think they're capable of jumping at that left shoulder and going past it. And the other reason I'm really interested in them doing that too is on those plays that Harden just tries to fall over, you have a step, and the Lakers are going to be able to they're going to be able to rebound pretty well. And that puts they used to do this to Kobe all the time. It used to bother me so much where Kobe would go up for a shot, and it's not that Kobe would fall, it was that he would stand there with his hand up and his follow through and try to put the body English on it to try to see it through the basket. And then as he was doing that, you would see the Rajah Bells and the Shane Battiers and so on and so forth leak out and get a couple easy buckets over the course of the game. And on those plays where Harden falls, this is where I want, Caruso or Kuzma or Green or KCP to leak out because, whether it's Dwight, whether it's JaVale, whether it's especially LeBron, they get that rebound, and that should be, 2 or 3 easy buckets per game.
This is actually, I hadn't thought of this until you mentioned that. Our long rebounding hasn't been great this season on the defensive boards. We're going to need to clean that up in this series because of how many threes they shoot. We're really great at securing boards around the rim, around the basket, but boards that bounce out to 10 plus feet away from, and of which a lot of threes do that, right?
Yeah.
We need better perimeter rebounding in this series than we have in previous games. But Dort did a fantastic job on Harden, and those are things like we don't have a defender like Dort because he's athletic and big, but those types of things, right? Staying disciplined in your closeouts, in how you look to bother a player. This is part of the reason why I think Harden has a little bit more difficulty in the postseason is the players are studying him and his tendencies and his way of kind of gaming the rules, right? And you come up with solutions like, all right, so what's the best way to bother him while really minimizing my chances of him drawing a whistle on this play? And what you described Dort doing is a great example of that. And I think you'll see that from our type of guys, even if we don't have that same type of defender.
Yeah, I think the guy I'm really looking for that the most from is probably Kuzma. Because he has the length to be able to get out there, and again, it's not about bothering. You aren't really going to affect the shot all that much. It's just that you're in his sight line. Like the thing that we were always taught growing up was if the shooter can see you, he is now like 25% less likely to make the shot, and that's basically what I'd be asking of the shooters. And then regarding because this is a series, I think. So what you're talking about initially, where it's like, don't get bitten by the step back game. I think early in the series, that's really key. And then later in the series as his legs, because he's going to, we see this every single series with Harden. He slows down over the course of the series. And I think as he slows down, that's where I'm more comfortable with him trying to shoot those step backs. Because like last night we saw him and the step backs he was shooting weren't so much threats as much as they just felt like cop outs. And I'm exhausted, so I'm just going to try to get this shot up at the rim.
So this point about exhaustion is a huge one. I'm so glad you brought it up. If you watch the Rockets play, they are built on standing around. That is on both ends of the floor. By design, they stand in one place for most of the game, right? And on the defensive end, that manifests itself in switching, right? Even just when two offensive players come together, they pretty much are going to switch everything as a result of that. And so what each individual player experiences in the process of that is a lot of standing around. There's nobody locking and trailing and sprinting to chase a shooter around a screen. They do not run much. Right, like the physical act of running.
Yeah, you think that they're this like they're this
right. Mike D'Antoni, 7 seconds or less.
Yeah.
No, they are
very selective about it.
And that the more this series has people running around, the better it is for us. The more it has people standing around, it's better for the Rockets. And that's part of the reason too I advocate the chasing Harden off of the 3-point line and funneling him and taking away his step back.
Yeah.
There's a progressive, it's not just how well is he going to convert on a points per possession basis on this possession, but I want Harden running as much as possible. I want these dudes exhausted from banging on bigger guys who are running fast as hell. Like, it's exhausting to play against athletes. I think I have an appreciation for athleticism because I have none at all. And so like guys who can fit, because I've been on courts with guys that I could not hang with. Right. And like, I knew the game, I could outsmart them. If you got me in like this right set of circumstances, I could actually play a little bit. Right. I could, but if you got me in a situation where I had to deal with an athlete, like, no, like it's no, like, and so
that one player who like looked at the super tall guy and you're just like, what am I supposed to do here?
You're right. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And it's not just that. It's what am I supposed to do over 7 games?
You're right.
So there's a progressive. You talk about the fatigue of Harden. There's a progressive element in the course of a series where, like, every time we run, even if we don't score off of it, it's a small victory. Every time Dwight like makes somebody go oof because he hit him with a little elbow or forearm in the chest is a small victory. And so from a philosophical standpoint, I'm very much looking to outclass these guys on an athletic basis because that's where our biggest advantage is. And so I want all of our philosophies and mentalities to fit that we're going to wear these dudes down athletically over the course of a 7-game series in a way. Like, I think we're super vulnerable at the beginning of this series. This Lakers team is like a diesel engine, right? Like we saw that in Portland. We saw that.
Yeah, you got to fire it up.
It just takes them a little while, right? And Houston just played a couple of days ago. And they're going to have some team specific stuff with us, but the Rockets, part of what makes them is they're going to do what they're going to do. So even though they haven't had a ton of time to prepare for us, I don't know how much that matters. So I think game 1 is very much in danger, but over the course of the series, let's wear these guys down and really leverage our physical advantages.
Really quickly before we throw to break, I'll just ask the question, or maybe I'll ask the question and then this is what we'll talk about at the beginning of the next segment. Bright Udoji, at Enter Energy writes, what's the minimum number of threes taken and made the Lakers have to average to keep up with Houston? I think that's an interesting one because, and as boring as it sounds, I hate like minimizing basketball down to a math question because I hate math. I just,
right.
I'm not good at it.
But Houston wants to make it a math game, right? If Houston wins this series, it's because they won the math of it, right?
Right. So
I suppose that's true of whomever, but they're literally going for the math of it.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a quick second here and we'll talk about this is about balancing the Lakers' identity with who they're playing against, and now in this case one of their opponents is math, so we got to figure out what that might look like. Today's show is brought to you in part by Built Bar. Head on over to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKEDONNBA and save $10 off your first order, and not just your first but your second and your third and your fourth, and so on and so forth until they run out of them again, just like we got them to last time. And you know what? There is no better statement than I or anybody else can actually make if you're trying to sell the product than just saying, hey, they literally ran out of bars the last time we worked with them because the bars are that good, the deal is that great, and they made it even better so long as supplies last by giving you a free cooler with purchase. So look, I've told you all about them. They're super nutritious, they're filling, they taste great. They actually offer you a little bit of energy so long as you know, if you're looking for a little punch because your sugar levels are a little low, whatever it might be, they just take care of you. And we are looking to take care of them in the same ways that the bars take care of us. So head on over to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get $10 off your next order and each order after that, and then spread the word. This is too good an offer and too great a product to keep to yourself. So one more time, BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKEDON.
You're up to date on your favorite team, but what about the competition?
Here we go!
John Hollinger and Nate Duncan are evaluating every bubble contender on Hollinger and Duncan. Rejecting the Screen goes behind the scenes with in-depth interviews, and the Locked On NBA podcast is recapping games daily. Let the Locked On NBA network of podcasts take care of your NBA bubble scouting reports. Hollinger and Duncan, Rejecting the Screen, the Locked On NBA podcast. Subscribe to the best trio of NBA podcasts on the planet, wherever you get your podcasts.
So again, as we talked about, this is about math. It really comes down to threes are literally worth more than twos, and the Lakers either have to generate more shots to keep and get up more shots in general to keep up with the Rockets shooting 3-pointers. But you know, from the easiest way to combat this math is to try to even out the literal number of threes that the Lakers are shooting here. So again, to kind of get back to where we started in this pod, how are you balancing what the Lakers' strengths are compared to how they have to counterbalance the math of this matchup?
So this is, to answer his question in a very crude way, is 10. I think we have to make at least 10 threes in most games to be able to win them. It becomes a question of where does the math work in our favor, right? And so the part of the advocacy of the two bigs approach on the offensive end, which I very much agree with, is the ability to crash boards and to get 35% of the available shots. And that's a lot, right? Like usually the average team defensive rebounds about every 3 out of 4 shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 75% is the normal defensive rebounding rate. 25% is the offensive rebounding rate. We should be shooting for 35% as a goal, even 40% in this series. And we can do that with like a two bigs approach. And so what that does from a math standpoint is it gets us more shot attempts, right? We can look at the box score at the end of the night, and we took 98 shots compared to their 70 to their 83, right? 16 more shot attempts. Yeah, maybe they're more efficient. Maybe they're getting that extra point, but we've made it up because we get 16 more shot attempts and we make 7 of them. A couple of them are kick out threes, right? So, hey, that's what, 16 points right there. that extra points
and
that
then
they
that
can't
makes up for the 15,
Right.
16, 20 points that we lose on the actual attempts at the 3-point line.
Right, or it at least bridges the gap between those two things. Then the place where both teams have some real proficiency is at the free throw line, is the ability to draw free throws for different reasons. Now, so that becomes, are we able to, and this, a lot of times free throw shooting is a whether or not they can guard you stat. And so this is another reason why I'm pointing all of like our philosophies toward our physical dominance and the choices that we make to choose the options where we're more physically dominant. And this is where I start talking myself more into the too big approach. I just want to chase Harden off of the 3-point line, even if it's with two bigs. I'd love to argue with Cranchus about it. But anyway, so that's where we can win the free throw battle, right? Is by like they can't compete with us around the hoop. We're just so much better athletically. So what do you do with somebody, right? This goes back to the same thing of when I'd play that guy that I couldn't guard, like go make 2 fucking free throws. Like,
Right.
I'm not going to let you dunk on me, like if I can stop it. So but I can't actually stop you. So like go make 2 free throws. You know what I mean? That's like the only thing I can do to stop that guy from doing that. And so that should be the attack and the real approach that we should look to be really physically dominant, come out like hunters, and just trying to really conquering horde, overrunning the city. That should be the mentality of the team.
Yep, I agree. Next question here. Actually, Cran just asked a question. I'd love to hear your perspective or hear perspective from both of you on the Rondo JR Waiter situation. And if you go through the thread here of all the questions being asked, Rondo's pretty pervasive.
Sure. Yeah, it's he who shall not be named thus far in all of our. Look, if playoff Rondo's a thing, now's the time to show it. For one, I also think it would be an extraordinary accomplishment by him, taking my opinion of him as a player, anyone's opinion, for anybody to go from. It's been 6 months since he played a real basketball game, or close to it. It would have been March 11th. So by the time we start with this series tomorrow, it's almost 6 months.
Yeah.
And you're starting in the second round of the playoffs as your first competitive game. What an enormous
against Russell Westbrook.
Leap. Right. Against like some physically. Right. You don't want to. So just from a getting up to speed standpoint, that's a huge ask of Rondo. And I think, so if he can do that, great. I think it's more likely what would be the outcome for most players is in a blowout in this series, like get his feet wet, get him some run, get him back up and running. I think that is more of the function of this series as it pertains to Rondo than full throttle participation. I mean, if he can do it, great, because I do think that there's value in watching the playoffs again. Like there's so many memories coming back. And this is the first time, right, since I've been covering it and my job has been to like really, really pay attention to what's going on. Is there's value in guys who aren't scared of the moment for whatever reason. Like that is a real thing. It sounds like this narrative type thing, but like watch
Shake Alexander at the end of that game.
He was so nervous. He's such a
God.
good player. He's such a good player. It's young guys especially.
Yeah.
They don't want to mess up. Like a guy like that, like they don't want to like, oh God, like everything there. He shot this floater and he made it. I was cracking up that whole game 7. I can't like say all of the things that I thought because some of them might be controversial, but that was one thing. He shot this floater. And so guys like him they really want to do their best. This means a lot to them. But like of course they're nervous. It's his first time really, like he was in the playoffs last year, but this is like a game 7, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this could go either way. And he was just trying not to screw it up. And that makes you tentative, right? Anyway, he shot this floater and he was like twisting in the air and like, I saw the look on his face was hysterical. His eyes were huge and he was like so locked in on that. And he's like, I'm going to make this floater. And he held on to it a little bit. He concentrated real hard and he made it. Right.
Yeah.
But that was his like energy. The whole game was just like,
especially down the stretch.
Dude, this happened. We talk about Kobe and how clutch he was. Even Kobe, this is what happened to Kobe in game 7 of 2010.
Yeah.
Kobe was so pumped, was so like, this is my time. Like everything in my life has been built up to this.
It was just like Chris Paul said before yesterday's game, I'm built for this. And then it's like those 3 minutes, you were built for something else, bud.
But that's the thing. It's like it's well intended, right? But in Kobe, in the way it goes bad for a guy like Kobe is different than the way it goes bad for a guy like SGA, right? In that, I mean, Kobe had his 4 air balls, right? That was another time where Kobe was shook.
Right.
Kobe was in his head. But it happened the same way as a rookie as it did in Game 7 of 2010 for Kobe. In that, so Kobe has practiced every type of shot that anyone's ever shot, and has spent hours and hours and hours on it, and really believes in the work that he's put in, and that the work that he's put in allows him to take any shot. Like he knows he can make any shot, and he's right about that. Right now, the difference between making it 20% of the time and making it 45% of the time matters, but he's not wrong that any shot Kobe was capable of making it. And so Kobe thinking that this is my time. Everything has built up to this to play the Celtics, right?
Yep.
Kobe's like comes out way too intense and way too like taking these wild fadeaways and these shots that are like, bro, like just swing the ball, you know, like you are doing too much right now. And that's the type of way that it would go bad for Kobe. But anyway, the Rondo is about it. That's something that we've seen in just mentality wise. These moments will not shake him. And that is like the Lakers haven't played a game like that. Lakers haven't played a game where they're like kind of scared. It's like they're like, oh, we're down 3-2. I mean, hopefully we don't. Right?
Game 1, by the way.
Right. And that's the thing is like how much after game 1, it ain't the pressure of after a game 5.
Yeah.
Or after a loss, right? Or maybe it gets tied up or you go down. And how you react to those moments really mattered. That's what bothered me about the Christmas Day game was we got in our heads and it was like, oh, we're making all these uncharacteristic mistakes now because of that. And so like, we're so used to being the hunters that we don't like being hunted. And the personality of the team is when a team really comes after us. And that's why the Clippers have the best chance of beating us, not just because they're so good, but because they can really bring some heat and make us feel like we're the ones being attacked in a way that I don't think that the Rockets can. Sorry, I've been talking. So, I'm really hyped up about this, man. I'm so excited.
I like it. I love it.
Got the juices.
I'm so happy. Also, it helps that we aren't recording it at 11 o'clock. It probably helps.
That's true. I've got energy. Yeah, good point.
But for my, my thoughts on the Rondo JR thing. Look, Waiters very clearly doesn't have Vogel's confidence. I think that's that's one of the things we were pretty easy to pick up over the course of that Blazers series. The Lakers do need a creator. Vogel probably thinks that creator is Rondo. If the Lakers are going to play those 2 big lineups, and say they're playing a 2 big lineup with AD and JaVale and LeBron is out, is not in the game, that's where Rondo makes a lot of sense, I think, just for his ability. He can funnel guys. He might get beat outright. So the difference between funneling and then getting beat outright is just what Rondo says he was trying to do there. So that's where I think it makes sense for him to play in those 2 big lineups. And then, JR in theory is somebody who makes sense for some of these spots, but he doesn't seem to have it. I wasn't really impressed with what he brought or what he's brought to this point. It's just like you said earlier, for Rondo, he hasn't played a game in 6 months. J.R. Smith hadn't played a game in 18 months.
And he looks like somebody who hasn't played many games any games in the last 18 months. Yeah.
And then you could say the same kind of thing about Waiters. So for all of these guys, like the situation here isn't one that lends itself to trying out some new stuff. And I think basically if the Lakers have to lean on any of those guys, I think they're in trouble. I think they should have enough to get by to where like those guys are house money type roles.
Sure. Yeah, I've wondered about that decision that Vogel made of going with J.R. Smith over Waiters. And the more I've been thinking a lot about, Vogel's approaches and kind of wondering. I always try to think when, like, I have a ton of respect for him as a coach and for what he's brought to the team and how prepared we've been. It's really a joy to cover a team, that has a guy that's really, really good at this.
Yeah.
So when he makes a decision where I'm like, that's not what I would have done, I'm like, I wonder what his argument is for it.
Yeah.
And in the case of JR over Dion, and I wonder if this applies to Rondo, I suspect it won't, but J.R. Smith I see good things on defense, right? Is he a good defender? No. He's a much better defender than Dion Waiters is.
Mm-hmm.
He's a much better defender than Rondo is, from what I've seen, right?
Doesn't take much.
That's the thing with
bars
Rondo.
are on the ground.
The thing with Rondo is that he's not going to be afraid of the moment, and he can handle the ball. Those are two things that are going to be very important as the deeper we get into these playoffs, hopefully, right? And so those are huge, but he needs to be able to defend. And that comes back to whenever Vogel does something that I don't agree with, I think, like, what's his argument? What's his side of it? And I try to figure out where he would be coming from. And the vast majority of the time, the conclusion that I come to is defense. Is like, this guy, because, and I get where it's coming from in the respect that, like, in order for defense to be good, if like 4 guys are playing really well and 1 guy is bad, your defense is below average at best. Right. It only takes 1 guy to screw it up. Mm-hmm. Now, does JR get lost? Absolutely. Are there times where he will rotate to the wrong guy, so there's 2 guys closing out to 1 guy, meaning the corner shooter's open or something like that? Yes. Mm-hmm. But relative to Dion and Rondo, but especially Dion in these circumstances in the bubble, that's the argument for it. And then the thought that eventually this dude's going to hit a shot. He is not, like, he's obviously way out of rhythm, but like, that's still J.R. Smith in there at some level, or is he just
And they
washed?
have to care about him. Like, even if he doesn't make a shot, preferably he makes a shot.